that will allow us to penetrate the cells which I guess are already in this country and to eliminate them. And then the military options that are being addressed right now is something that I think we should sit back and allow to occur. It is a tough place, yeah.
You know, we heard from the administration earlier in the day, a number of the administration members talking through the importance of what is ahead and emphasizing that this would be a war, a different sort of war than what Americans have seen in the past, that the emphasis will be on both intelligence and policing. Can you explain that to us?
Yes, and well, also, the president not too long ago mentioned that we need to bring other sorts of power that we as a nation have to the fore. We have diplomatic power. I think we're seeing some interesting developments, for instance, in the cooperation right now of Pakistan. And we have to be very careful how we play those cards, because this is a region where you have had tensions between Pakistan and India, India and China, China assisting Pakistan, and China has its own design. So they're having to walk a very delicate balance there to pull together the international cooperation. We also have economic power. The president mentioned it, and we need to use those levers when we can. But at bottom, what we have to do, as I said, in a three-step process, is eliminate the terrorist cells in this country, to get to where they are in the other countries, wherever that may be, and to serve notice to nations that may be protecting them, that we will cross international borders. We have that right under the UN Charter to protect American lives. We will cross their borders, if necessary, to take out people who are planning attacks against the United States. And then, thirdly, to address the diplomatic environment so that we can hopefully eliminate this as a threat. Cut this cancer away from the populations that have now been supporting it, tacitly or otherwise, and then hopefully move into a different kind of a world. That is the objective of all of this.
James Webb, former Secretary of the Navy, giving us particular insight and understanding into the issues that face the government today. Also with us at this hour is Robin Wright from the Los Angeles Times. As I mentioned earlier, she is an international correspondent and has tremendous insight and knowledge about this particular region in the course of her coverage. Robin, we want to sort of pull out from what James Webb was just talking about, this notion of the involvement of other nations and how they play into this. We have talked quite a bit on our air about Pakistan in particular in its relationship to Afghanistan. Explain to our viewers that even if there is cooperation offered, it is not all that easy to come by, particularly for this state that we believe to have some nuclear capability.
Pakistan is indeed a very unstable place. We have to remember that the military government came to power a couple of years ago by aborting a democratic process, overthrowing a democratic government. And it's a rather fragile government today, even though it is led by military leaders. It has its own Islamic problem, Islamic extremists who are operating in Kashmir and whom they don't completely control. It has a large Islamic sector who vote for Islamic parties, and that should the United States be perceived as too heavy-handed or going too far in that part of the world, there could be the kind of backlash that in fact created Osama bin Laden in the first place.
And we advise that Pakistan and Afghanistan share this very long border, quite porous though, I understand.
It's a very porous border, and the interesting thing is that there are many in the military who actually look with favor at the Taliban, and they believe that Afghanistan under the Taliban is an important buffer for Pakistan and an important ally when India, next door, is a predominantly Hindu country with which there are serious territorial disputes.
All right, as well, we talk about the other long border for Afghanistan, and that is Iran. Of course, our viewers thoroughly understand that. To put it very mildly, the United States has had its differences with Iran over the years. Tell us how that plays into the rubric here.
Well, that's really an interesting question, because today Secretary of State Powell made a public overture to Iran and indicated that the United States was exploring the possibilities of some kind of role for Iran. Of course, there has been 2 decades of tension dating back to the 1979 takeover of the American embassy. But Iran has the second longest border, and it has its own problems with the Taliban. In fact, the government in Tehran feels greater hostility toward the Taliban than it does to the United States or even toward Israel. It looks down on the Taliban as a primitive force because of their treatment of women, because they allow the largest poppy crop in the world for production of opium and heroin, for its elimination of all culture, from movies to cinema to music. And it feels very threatened by a country next door that is predominantly Sunni, and Iran is predominantly Shiite. So there are a lot of reasons for hostility. And I think the United States would be very interested in exploring just what possibilities there are between the two. It's going to be a long haul. Nothing's going to happen overnight. But Iran plays a critical part in this coalition, and because of its long border.
All right, let's go wider into the region as well. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think along with Pakistan, Saudi Arabia and the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, are the only nations that recognize the Taliban as the government of Afghanistan.
That's right, and they're going to play very important roles too. Part of the problem with Osama bin Laden is not just the networks he's created, but the enormous amount of money he has at his expense to pay for things like flight schools and positioning cells in probably 36 different countries around the world. And rich Saudi individuals have played key roles over the last 20 years in helping fund Osama bin Laden's activities. And so what role Saudi Arabia plays both in cutting off the Taliban and Osama bin Laden financially, and what role the United Arab Emirates plays, because many of these extremists have ended up with Emirate passports.
Right.
So these are two countries that are really critically important in this coalition, in getting their cooperation to squeeze both the Taliban and then Osama bin Laden.
And then even though Saudi Arabia has, for example, hosted the U.S. as it participated in the no-fly zones, I mean, Saudi Arabia has been an ally to the United States in this sense, but it isn't necessarily an easy tightrope for the Saudi government to walk either.
That's absolutely right. And in fact, I think one of the big problems is going to be calculating how far we can go in asking for participation by some of these countries without jeopardizing their standing at home. And there's also a moral question for us. We're asking for help from countries, a military regime in Pakistan, one of the world's last autocratic monarchies in Saudi Arabia, another monarchy in the United Arab Emirates, which have among the worst human rights records in the world. And it's going to be a real challenge for us to be able to justify creating a coalition in which they are central players and helping prop them up in order to get at Osama bin Laden.
Thank you very much, Robin Wright of the Los Angeles Times, for your particular insight into this troubled region and why it is not quite as easy as some people might think. We want to understand a little bit more about Afghanistan itself. Now, there are many in that rugged and austere country at this hour preparing for another war at the hands of a very powerful enemy. CNN is the only Western news organization with reporters still in areas under Taliban control, and one of them, CNN's Nick Robertson, who filed a report on a people well accustomed to bloodshed and deprivation.
Bustling trade in Afghanistan's street markets belies an impending sense of isolation beginning to grip many Afghans. Concerns about the likelihood of an American attack and the possibility borders with Pakistan and Iran may close have driven food prices up 10 to 15%. Concern also Afghan people could become innocent victims. They should wait until it's clear Osama was involved, this vendor says. America shouldn't make any attack on Afghanistan, this trader says, because the Afghan people are not involved and not responsible. Many here, however, are too poor to flee the cities. 22 years of conflict has ruined infrastructure and economy alike. The years of war have also built up a resilience among many Afghans, to the point where a new attack would be a continuation of their ongoing battles. The result of Russian aggression was the breaking of Russia into 16 countries, this old man says, remembering the 1980s Soviet occupation. If America attacks us, Allah will divide America into 52 pieces. From influential tribal elders, not necessarily aligned with the Taliban, however, a call for diplomacy.
We advise the Taliban that they must discuss everything with everyone and not close the doors to negotiation.
However, the tribal elders also said if Afghanistan is attacked, they will back the Taliban to the end, a sentiment echoed on the streets here. As the last of the international aid workers began leaving because the Taliban said they could no longer guarantee their safety, Afghanistan's total isolation appears now closer than ever. Nick Robertson, CNN, Kabul, Afghanistan.
In New York, Mayor Rudy Giuliani says New Yorkers are more united than ever as the massive rescue and recovery efforts at Ground Zero continue. Crews digging through the rubble have yet to find any survivors today. CNN's Bill Hemmer is standing by in Lower Manhattan, and CNN medical correspondent Dr. Sanjay Gupta is at the Cornell Burn Center, where those burns in the attack are being treated. Let's go first to Sanjay Gupta. Sanjay, I want to advise our viewers that some of the video that you have is very graphic. They may not want to watch it, but describe what you are seeing right now.
That's right, Wolf. It's exactly as you say. You know, while there are close to 5,000 missing or dead, there are many survivors who barely escaped with their lives. Been sitting talking to some of these patients in the burn unit, Wolf, here at Weill Cornell Burn Center, one of the largest burn centers in the country, by the way. And some of their stories that I've heard today were actually frankly horrifying. Let's listen to one of them right now.
Just getting into work about 8:45. Getting out of the elevator, walking in the hallway. I was on 83rd floor of the first tower. All of a sudden, as I'm walking in the hallway, I hear a door explode, and just this big ball of fire just engulfed me. I just froze. I didn't do anything. I just stood there.
He just stood there, Wolf, in a large ball of fire. He was looking down the hallway, and this ball of fire just came at him. And it obviously burned him. You could see there on his face and really throughout his entire trunk, his legs, and his arms. I talked to the doctors afterwards. What they told me was rather interesting. About 155-degree temperature for even 1 second will give you a third-degree burn. They think these balls of fire from jet fuel and whatnot up to 1,000 degrees, so 5 to 10 times what it takes to give you a third-degree burn. And these were just literally engulfing people, literally incinerating people as they walked through that building. I talked to another woman, Wolf, who thinks she may in fact have been the last person out of the building. Let's hear from her.
If you don't let me get out of here, I'm not going to be able to make it. Finally, the EMS said, okay, let's go. After we turn around the corner, the whole building collapsed on us. So I'm very, very, very lucky. But any of my friends who's up in the 78th floor, either they got crushed or on the way down to the stairs, they were late.
I sat down and I spoke with her for some time, Wolf, and what she was describing there, she was actually trying to save her boss. She was one of those people who was told actually no need to evacuate the building. She did think that she needed to evacuate the building. Her boss had broken her leg. She was literally dragging her boss through these offices over many other dead bodies. Took an elevator down. When the elevator opened up, a big ball of fire actually killed several of the people in front of the elevator, in front of her. She was able to finally run out of the building, and as she turned around the corner, the entire building collapsed. So just unbelievable, really, really stories, Wolf, that I heard today over here at Weill Cornell.
Sanjay, have they identified all of the burn victims at the Cornell Burn Center and other hospitals in the New York area?
That's what they've told me, Wolf. They have been able to identify all the burn victims at this time. We did talk about a few burn victims that had 90 to 100% burns over the past few days, and they also told us that the patient that we specifically spoke of with 100% burn did indeed pass on.
Our viewers obviously know you're a medical doctor. What kind of prognosis, what is the recovery going to be like for these burn victims?
Well, there's some ways to look at this, and you keep in mind that technology is changing, so the survivability is changing literally by the day. A simple rule of thumb that a lot of the doctors told me and that I learned from medical school was that the percent burn over your body plus your age equals your likelihood of death. So people who have, 50% burns and that may be in their 40s or 50s, you can imagine their likelihood of survival is quite small. They also said your recovery period really for every percent of burn on your body is about the number of days that you'll be spending in the hospital. So for those that have 50 to 60% burns in their body, they'll probably be in the hospital for 2 months, getting skin grafts, getting debridements, getting physical therapy, all those sorts of things. It's an incredibly long and unfortunately incredibly painful road for a lot of these burn victims. But as I said, some of these folks may actually survive this.
Dr. Sanjay Gupta, thank you very much for that information. And let's move across Manhattan now, down to Ground Zero in Lower Manhattan.